Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the Allistair podcast, the podcast where we talk leadership, culture, and mindset. Now, in this episode, I've decided to go back to 2021 and put together some of the best interviews and discussions over culture, leadership, and mindset. But before we get into this one, I just want to say a massive thanks to each and every one of you who have left a rating or review on iTunes. I greatly appreciate it. And also for sharing the podcast on social media. In fact, some really cool news. By sharing an episode of the Allistair podcast on social media, be it Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, you could win my book, Lead with Purpose, Make Impact. Include the hashtag Allistair podcast, and who knows, you could be walking off with one of my books. Okay, moving on to the show, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I went back to 2021 to the episodes that we had and pulled out some of the best bits and lessons on culture and leadership. Now, in these lessons of leadership, you're going to hear from people such as Ljubicic, the coach of Roger Federer, Phil Neville, the head coach and manager at Inter Miami soccer team, Kate Richardson Walsh, a former gold medalist in hockey, Steph Houghton, the Manchester City and England international soccer player, Phil Jones, the CEO of Brother Technologies, Ben Ryan, the winning coach from the 2016 Olympic Games, that was for Rugby Sevens with Fiji, as well as from another gold medal winning coach, Bev Priestman from Canadian Soccer, Tracey Neville, the former England Netball head coach, and Anthony Seibold, the former Broncos head coach, who now since 2021 now works alongside Eddie Jones at England Rugby. But we start with Steph Houghton, the England and Manchester City soccer captain, and I asked her, what are the qualities of a great leader?
For me, in terms of the captains that I've experienced being under and all the leaders, I think definitely a professional element. I think you have to show that you care about your teammates and the staff and the environment that you're in. You have to be a good communicator. I think that's not just between your teammates, but you have to be that link between your teammates and the staff and be able to voice messages. You have to be a winner in my eyes. I think the best captains that I've played under have always tried to win at all costs, and within a team game, that is the ultimate aim, is to win. And to be adaptable, I think that's the biggest learning from me, is that no matter what environment you're in, there's people change, there's different situations that come around, and having that ability to adapt to different people, different personalities, different situations, that is crucial in terms of leadership. So, I think that's a big one for me.
I then asked Steph how important she felt vulnerability was in a leader.
Massively. I think for me, I think I've definitely learned that over the last few years from myself. I think you ask so much of others, and for me, you can't always be this strong person all the time or this positive person. I'd like to think that I'm quite a consistent person in terms of my attitude and my mood, but ultimately, there's going to be days when maybe I'm feeling a bit low, I'm feeling a little bit tired. And for me, it took us a while to actually go, it's all right to show that. I'm a normal person. I'm the same as my teammate next to us. I'm the same as my staff member next to us. And I think showing that vulnerability puts you in a position of power in terms of it shows the team that you're normal, and it doesn't change how you are with them. It just shows that you're not this person that just puts on a front all the time. It's okay to have them bad days or to react a little bit differently as long as you sort it out after. But ultimately, we're all human, and some things like that happen, and vulnerable moments do happen in sport. There's so many highs and lows that you have to be as consistent as you possibly can. But ultimately, the reality is you can't be like that 100% of the time.
I asked Steph how important trust was in leadership, and how does a leader gain it?
I think it's having them connections with people. I think honesty is a massive thing. I think the successful teams that I've been a part of, I think in terms of trusting, you have to be able to provide good information, good communication skills. You have to challenge people as well. I think sometimes people think, oh, a good culture or a good team togetherness is all positive and it's all nicey nice. Well, it's not necessarily like that. I think ultimately the aim of the game is to win and to be successful, and the only way we can do that is providing that balance. And I think if you show, like you said, in terms of being vulnerable might be actually giving people some information that they may necessarily not like, but actually providing information with substance for the benefit of the team. I think with me, I think it's kind of like whatever information you're getting is because you want the team to do well or you want that person to do well. And I think it's that acceptance. And I think the more connections you make within your teammates and the more honest conversations and just that interaction, it does go a long way to build trust, and opening up and being honest with how I feel or how everybody else feels really helps you build that trust in that circle.
In episode 116, I got to speak to the current coach of Roger Federer, Ivan Ljubicic. Now, Ivan is a former world number 3 tennis player himself and a Davis Cup winner. And I asked him, what was it like transitioning from being a professional player and going into a coaching role? And was it difficult?
It was not difficult, honestly. I felt like it was natural for me. You really have to turn your how you go about things. As a player in tennis, you are, especially when you're older, you are the CEO of the company, so to say. You are the one who makes decisions, and then you have people around you who advise you and push you when you need to be pushed. But you are the one who decides basically everything. And then once you become a coach, I wanted to give Milos at the beginning, also this power to make decisions, and sometimes he was ready, sometimes he was not, but I felt that was the right thing to do. So you really basically change the roles completely. It's completely not about you anymore. It's about the player, it's about somebody else, and a lot of, former players might struggle with that, and I really didn't have problems with it. I think I did quite a good job with Milos. He was young, upcoming player with a lot of potential. His serve and forehands are just amazing. And for me, I really enjoyed studying, his game and his opponents and how I could make him better. And obviously, then with Roger was similar. Also, once you see him on TV, you play against him, it's one thing. But when you're actually sitting on the chair in front of him or next to him and trying to make him better, you just have to try to find the right angle, how to help the player that you're working with.
During this chat with Ivan, I also asked him what he felt had contributed to a successful working relationship with Roger. Did he put it down to anything specifically?
The coaching is not do this and the player does it, and then you say, I told him to do that and he did it, so I'm great. The coaching in tennis, especially, it's a relationship, it's a friendship, it's spending a lot of time together, including the dinners, the lunches, the breakfasts, the traveling, the this, that. So you can't really point the finger at one thing. What did you do with the player? When the players are younger, when the juniors are coming up and you see the technical problem or imperfection, and then you work on it, and then you really can visually see the impact you have on the player. You see the shot changing. This is something that it's much easier to kind of analyze. But with the older players, it's just not, I really hate when the commentators start, the Novak is starting to work with Boris Becker. You can see the work of Boris, he's going more to the net. Come on, it's not that simple. It doesn't work like that. The guy went to the net, so all the players that he's going to work with are going to go to the net. That's not the work of the coach. The work of a coach is try to get out of the player what he has inside and he's not been able to express himself, and just, tweaks here and there. So it's impossible to answer that question in like sharp and simplified way. It's just not possible.
In this next clip, you'll hear from Tracey Neville. the former England netball coach who won gold at the Commonwealth Games in 2018. I asked Tracey what she looked for in a leader or a captain.
Do you know, I probably had about 3 captains during my time, and over 5 years, that's quite significant. And I think what we're scared of now is changing the captain to the environment that you have. And at the time when I first started out with the Roses, I needed a player that was really valuable to me off the court, that could really bring in a team, could really be powerful, and didn't need to excel on the court, but people had a lot of respect for, that really listened to, that could really impact an environment. And I think that's something that Ama Agabezi really, really offered me through her particular leadership. You know, she was a people person. She needed that interaction. She had an intelligence where she could knew the power of bringing a culture together, enforcing the values. She could speak to hierarchy. She could speak to less experience, and that was quite powerful for her. Obviously, as time went on, I obviously didn't go on to select her for the World Cup. I selected Serena Guthrie. Well, she was a completely different leader, because at that particular time we didn't have access to all our players, and in that environment, what I needed a leader that led by example. I needed someone that brought the environment up on the training court, that set the standard that, in training, everything is hard. We've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. We hear that loads, but, when we're tired, that she still pushes on. She's still 10 meters above everybody. And we needed someone in that environment at a particular time to bring everybody up to the standard that she was, because we didn't have our best talented athletes in that environment leading into that World Cup. So I think, as a leader, I think it's really important that you're not shy to, change your leadership to suit your environment, because, there's only certain people who can shine on the court and off of the court at the same time. And, it depends where you are in evolving your particular sport and your particular environment. And at that particular time, it was essential that I moved that leadership on to create with what the team was doing and how it was evolving.
Now, we all know in leadership that having the hard or difficult conversations are a necessity, and nobody likes having them. So I asked Tracey how she approached the difficult or hard conversations.
With them difficult conversations, we come up with a thing where we actually put it onto the table and worked out how we were going to deal with that, because you're not just, you can go in there and really deal with strict and be really blunt, but you have to understand that you've got a duty of care for people around you when you're dealing with them difficult conversations. And, for me to go in there and just go directly at that particular player would probably, I've learned that that's not the best scenario, because there could be so much other things going on within that particular environment. There also needs to be that particular player has to be supported when you're going in with them difficult conversations as well. So, and you've also got to protect yourself within these days. So sometimes we approached it, myself with another member of one of them senior leader management teams. So we actually we thought them two were the best people to go into that particular environment to deal with that scenario. Or we allowed that person to have someone support them within that, because we knew that person would probably not be able to manage that difficult conversation. So she had someone to be able to take some of that pressure away from them. The other thing we did with difficult conversations was they can become fewer and fewer if you create a good team culture. You have obviously behaviours and values that you live up to. So a lot of our environment was managed by our players. So if players or someone stepped outside them, we could pull them back to values and behaviours. So actually it wasn't always myself who were going into them difficult conversations. The second sort of scenario that we did within that was we had a process. So when I was going in, for example, to drop a player or say their fitness testing results were not high enough or whatever we were going in with, and there was a process to that. They weren't just told that 6 months down the line. There was a process that there was a checking point at the 1 month mark, the 3 month mark, the 4 month mark. We had data to back that up. We had performance. So they weren't just gone in and said, right, you dropped, you're done. It was more of a case of, you have been dropped, but this is where we feel, your areas of development, where your work-ons are. These are fields where we feel you're stronger at. where can we start to work a lot more on your strengths, but add on these work-ons. And I think them were the sort of processes we sort of followed. And it was just, like I say, if you're always having difficult conversations, and I did do at the start of my Roses coaching campaign, I always went into environments where they were difficult, then I feel that you've not set up the right environment. And I think then become less and less with the environment that you create.
In episode 138, I had the pleasure of chatting to Ben Ryan, the Olympic gold medal winning coach of the Fiji Sevens rugby team. Ben is an expert in leadership and culture, and I asked him, when he walks into a new team or venture, what are the first things he looks for, or what are the first steps he takes?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll do is I'll do a kind of an MOT where I'll just look around and talk to people and see what's going on the floor. So, as you know, people will tell you about their culture, but actually seeing it on a day-to-day, talking with people and understanding it, then you start to drive towards where you think they could make some changes. And it's not just about, I kind of use the analogy that, the norm is like most people like to feel like they're part, they have belonging, and they like to be liked, and they might do that above wanting self-improvement. So, to take a simple example, when I was a kid, you want to do some extra kicking practice after school in the evenings, but all your mates want to go to the pub. To do that decision as an individual makes you feel a bit isolated, and it's also a tougher one to take. And actually, like, as a culture, you want the opposite. You want that big group to be the ones that are all doing that extra practice, because that's the norm. And so it's how you drive to that. Have some guiding principles around, okay, you go in, you have a look, you talk to people about what they want. So what is their goal? Is it to win the Premier League? Okay. If you want to win the Premier League, then what sort of athletes, what sort of coaches, what sorts of team do you need to achieve that? And then you start to have a look at values. I'm not a big fan of having too many values. I actually kind of like just having one, and having all the behaviours from that. And then it's tying all the little bits together. So it's making sure that everyone's on the same page, whether it's your physical, your conditioners or your psychs or your coaches. And sometimes it gets lost a little bit. I mean, let's take Premier League football at the moment. They're playing a game every 3 or 4 days. Yeah. Some of which is overseas in Europe and some is at home. Really all they're doing is playing, recovering, travelling, playing, recovering, and that's it. And if you're not careful, then what gets lost is, in that, with lots of changes, people are getting dropped, people are getting selected. And those conversations perhaps aren't wrapped around that, and you can lose players at this point, and you can look back as a coach going, actually, I haven't had a decent conversation with this guy for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And somebody that can see that and can start mopping it up and adding that clarity and helping people take some of that weight off their shoulders, I think is really important to keep that consistency as a culture, because otherwise you will end up having blind spots.
So Ben, what are some of the non-negotiables for you when working with the team? So standards, if you like.
I think I would kind of reverse back a stage and I go, anything that you want to put in as a non-negotiable, I call them guardrails. So if you imagine like every team operates within a box, and the box, the walls of those boxes are your guardrails, but they have to be agreed. So as a coach, or if I'm there as a performance director and the head coach says, right, this is the timings and this is the consequences if you're late or you do, if the players haven't agreed that, then you're not going to get the ownership of that, and it's those guardrails aren't going to be very strong. And so anything that they do, you have to explain why you're doing it, and they have to agree it, and then there's that connection. So why is it important? And it sounds silly, but why is it important to be on time? And so you have to connect, and the players have to understand that, because it sounds such a simple thing, but I have seen it in elite sport where actually they're a bit too flexible on their timings, and it means that, I don't know, the really crucial part of the warm-up, which might be taking shots at goal just before, to sharpen your shooting skills as a striker just before you're about to go on the field. You don't get to do it because they've come to the training session late. That then affects your performance. So everything has to be agreed and then the guardrails. And then once they're agreed, then you have to make sure that you consistently apply them. So I think my non-negotiables is consistency once those guardrails are being put into place.
In episode 124, I had the former England international and Olympic gold medalist in hockey, Kate Richardson Walsh, someone who has led both her club and country multiple times. I asked her what qualities she thought were important for a leader.
I do think setting the example. I do think that's imperative. I think it now as a coach, I'm still, I'm a leader, and I need to set the example. If we've decided what we want to be about as a team, what our values are, and what our behaviours are, I need to lead on that. I need to role model those behaviours and values and be about that. So I do think setting the example for me is really high up the list of things that I look for. And then I just think an authenticity. That it's really them. It is, again, who they are. They're not trying to be something else. It's really genuine and authentic, and because I think people will follow that. I think if it's, this is what I think they want from me, or this is the mask I'm going to put on today because this is what they need from me, I think people see through that over time. So I think they're, I'd say they're the two things.
In episode 115, I had the pleasure of chatting to the former Manchester United and Everton football player Phil Neville. Phil, who's now the head coach at Inter Miami, just down the road from me, and having played under one of the most successful, if not the most successful managers and leaders in football, Sir Alex Ferguson, would Sir Alex's leadership style have worked today?
His leadership style, what I would say from the manager that I met 30 years ago, it evolved with time. It kept evolving all the time. He was moving with the time. Almost, I'm going to say, he moved before the time. I never forget, we got into the first team, 18 years of age, and we came to a pre-match meal. Pre-match meals back then was literally eat what you wanted to eat. And all of a sudden we were eating pasta. We were eating pasta probably 2 years before the whole of the Premier League was eating pasta. He was ahead of his time. He brought sports science in 2 years before sports science came into football. So what he was always doing, he was always moving with the times. And his real speciality was he would get the best practitioners in to take the new breed forward. He would always be learning off other people. What is the new skill? What is the new technique? What's the new system that people are playing? And then get the best in to help him implement that into his football club. And that's why he used to change his probably assistant every 2-3 seasons, because he just kept evolving and it was fascinating the way that he went from almost a leadership model with the old type players, the millennium type things, and then he brought in the foreign players where he had to adapt his language and his tone and his leadership style. And then obviously there was the next generation then of the academy system player where he had to change for them as well. So I think it was frightening the way he kept evolving, and he never stood still. The bus kept moving and he kept moving with the bus and driving it, and I think that is a great quality to have.
I asked Phil what were some of the lessons he had taken from Sir Alex Ferguson during his time at Manchester United, and how did Sir Alex impact him as a player and a person?
I think you've got to have a connection with the player and the person. The person first, the player second. When I signed at 11 years of age, I walked into the Cliff training ground, and Sir Alex Ferguson knew that my dad worked at Bury Football Club, my mum worked at Bury Football Club, my granddad worked at Bury Football Club. He knew that I played cricket. He knew that my dad was a cricketer. He knew that my mum played football. And the minute that my parents sort of like heard him speak about the depth of knowledge about our family, my dad just said, "You can trust this man with your life." His connection skills were fantastic. He knew everything about every single player. He walked into a room, and without speaking to a player, he could smell the sense of the room. He could understand how a player was thinking or feeling, and he knew exactly how to deal individually with every single member of his squad. So you got a squad of 26 players. Individually, he had a different way of dealing with every single one of them. And I always tell the story about when you go and see him in his office, and it was quite daunting. Nobody enjoyed doing it. It was almost like you would go in there. It was the last thing on earth that you had to do, and it was always, he had a way that if it was a real serious conversation, he would sit opposite you at the desk. If it was something about the way that you was playing, about your attitude, about something, he would sit opposite you at the desk. If it was something where he wanted to build you up, give you confidence, tell you how you was, give you a new contract, he would take you over to his settee, sit next to you, a little bit more interpersonal. And you think to yourself at the time, like, such a small thing, but that is genius in terms of how he made you feel. And you never left his office without feeling $1 million. You never left his office without thinking, that man has got my back. I'm going to run through a brick wall. Even if he was leaving you out the team, and he left me out the team a lot of times, I never left his office thinking I wasn't an important part of his squad, because the first thing he used to always say to me when he was leaving out, Phil, I'm not playing you tomorrow, but you do not underestimate your value to me and to this football team. Without you, this team wouldn't be successful because of the commitment, your drive, your determination. So you would actually thank him for leaving you out. It was such a great skill he had of dealing with people. And I listen to Pochettino, I see Klopp, I see Pep. The way that they deal with people, for me, is far more important than the tactics that they have on the field or the system that they play.
Having moved from Manchester United to Everton, I asked him what the differences were between the two clubs and of the leadership styles between Ferguson and David Moyes.
There's big difference in the clubs. Management styles were two Glaswegians, two really intense people. David Moyes, he came at the right time in my career, that I needed someone that was, young, was really ambitious, knew he wanted to get to the very top. He wanted to be the best manager in the league. He wanted to build a fresh, new, vibrant football club, new training ground, etc. And he was someone that he became a mentor. He became someone that I was just fascinated with because of his drive and his determination. The difference in the clubs was, I suppose, the expectation. At Manchester United, you have to win. You have to win games of football. You have to win trophies. At Everton, you want to win. And there's a difference between wanting to and having to. Yep. I love both experiences. Probably the Everton one was equally as rewarding as the Manchester United one, because it made me grow up as a person. It took me totally out of my comfort zone. Sir Alex and Manchester United, we had a barrier around us. We were protected. Nothing got in. There was no leaks in that wall. And almost going out of the Manchester United bubble helped me grow up as a person, made me stand on my own 2 feet. It made me appreciate, actually, and grow as a person in my life, never mind as a footballer. And I think that equally was as good as, and the similarities was that the supporters at either club were unbelievable in terms of the demands that they put on their players was fantastic. And that's really what kept me going at Everton.
In episode 134, I got to chat to the CEO of Brother Technologies UK, Phil Jones. An avid cyclist, I asked Phil what he felt made a great leader.
Well, there's 3 things I think are really worth thinking about, and I'll summarise those as being mastery of subject matter, mastery of self, and situational awareness. So if we break those down quickly, mastery of subject matter is really improving your technical capability all the time in either your industry or your job role or function, very much competencies and skills, all of that area. That's the subject matter pillar. The mastery of self is really about metacognition, understanding one's own thoughts. We're very unique as humans in that we're able to think about our thoughts, to analyse, to understand how we feel, our emotional regulation, all of those things. And if you want to be an effective leader, you must understand yourself. You must be able to emotionally regulate. You must be able to understand where you are, how you feel, how you're making other people feel. So you must be able to really have this ability to look within, to understand how you are operating.
I also asked him if he could go back to the beginning of his career, what would he have done differently?
Oh gosh, I think I would probably spend an awful lot more time investing in myself. I think that it's very easy at the beginning of your career to become over-focused on what's the next step, You become focused about the steps in the career rather than the overall journey. And I think the steps become as a byproduct of the journey. Almost linked back to that conversation we had a moment ago, really. So I think I would have spent a lot more time reading, being more open, trying to grow my knowledge base. I would have definitely tried to work a lot more on my metacognition, my understanding of self, because I only really got to develop a lot of that in my early 30s when actually I had this chance meeting with a sports psychologist. I would love to have met him earlier in my life. I wish I had, because I think my ability to understand self and therefore understand others may well have dramatically increased as a younger person, and I think that would have been very valuable to me in all walks of my life.
During the year, I got to chat to the head coach of Canadian women's soccer, Bev Priestman. I asked Bev, what are the first steps she takes when she joins a team, especially when it came to culture?
Yeah, so I actually joined Canada, if I use Canada as an example, during the COVID world. And so the team hadn't been together for almost a year. So the first thing I did was listen. I met with every single player, asked some questions and got below the surface a little bit. Not face to face, but where I could, I did that. So I just listened to, must have been about 30 players, took on board, and straight away there was some key themes that I knew over the next 9 months for an Olympic Games. I had to turn this team around. You know, they'd gone some really bad run before my time. And yeah, I listened first. I think that's critical. You have to listen. You have your own vision and then how you blend that with the needs of the group. So I listened. And then when we did get together, the first thing I did was set a really bold vision. You know, this team had gone back-to-back podiums of bronze medals at Olympic Games. And I said, right, we're going to change the colour of the medal. And made that bold statement and got the group to really buy into that. And I think it was critical because if I wanted more, I had to ask more of them. And, you know, I think setting that bold vision, listening. And then the last thing I did was really delve into what my values were as a person and what the team's values were. And we really blended the two to make that part of our culture and our environment towards that Olympic Games.
I also asked Bev how important she felt one-on-one meetings were with her players.
Yeah, not as much as I would like, to be honest with you. It's always, if you asked any player, and I would put my money on this, international coaching, give me feedback. They'd all say more one-on-ones. And so I want to do more than probably what I can in that 10-day window. So in the Olympics, I actually, as a habit early on, put a sheet up, everyone signed up because it forced me to make the time because it's the most important thing. And I always promised myself in my career that I would do that more. So yes, I value it. Yes, I do it a lot on camp, but I would like to do more because I think it's critical. Them little conversations, you can find out a whole lot about what that player needs going into a game. And so, you know, even now I'm about to appoint a new full-time assistant coach. That'll be critical off camp to make sure I have them relationships that these players need to run through a brick wall for you when they're on the pitch. I would just say actually in general, in international coaching, and it might be unique because you have a small window and you've got to perform versus club environment, you're on, 40 weeks a year, there'd be no excuse not to have one-on-one meetings. And so I think every player would like to, no matter whether you're Christine Sinclair and you're the highest goal scorer in the world, every player has their own insecurities and they want to know what the coach thinks and, how they can get better and all the rest of it. So I just actually think it's high performers want that connection. They want to know what they need to do to be better. And I think our job as coaches is to work with them on that and fulfill their potential.
Last but not least, I had Anthony Seibold on the podcast. Anthony currently works under Eddie Jones at England Rugby and was the former Broncos head coach in Brisbane, Australia. I asked him, what are the qualities he sees in a great coach or leader?
Yeah, so for me, I think having a growth mindset to continuously wanting to get better yourself. I think it's important that as a coach, you want to do the very best that you can for the players. So I think having a growth mindset and wanting to get better is really important. The other thing that I think about as a great coach is that you're almost like a servant, or certainly my take on it is that you're a servant to the players. I'm very much an athlete-centered coach, and I think that when I came through as a young guy playing sport, probably most coaches were very much coach-centered, that it was all about the coach and what they said and so on. But I think that as coaching's progressed, having an athlete-centered approach to coaching is really important. And, I think, the other thing is the best coaches make the complex simple. Mm. And I think, there's been some great research done by a guy called Cliff Mallett on serial winning coaches. And there's some traits that each of them have had over a long period of time. And they're the types of traits that you see with those successful coaches.
So there you have it, guys. Episode 4 in the bag. Lessons in leadership, the best of 2021. I hope you enjoyed that. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you could stand a chance of winning my book, Lead with Purpose, Make an Impact, by simply sharing this episode on social media using the hashtag Allistair McCall Podcast. Connect with me on social media. I'm on Twitter at Allistair McCall, Instagram, Be Champion Minded, and on Facebook, Allistair McCall page. All books available on Amazon worldwide. So, until next time, keep making an impact.